There is no such thing as healing in the Imperium, not in the way we understand it, not in the way it used to mean. Here, medicine is not the art of preserving life. It is the discipline of ensuring that suffering serves its purpose. Every syringe is sanctified, every incision a rite, every patient a transaction. Whether you're bleeding on the battlements of a hive's upper spire or choking in the ash-choked gutters of a feral manufactorum, the logic is the same. Pain is part of the machine, and the Officio Medicae is the hand that turns the cog. Across the trillions of worlds ruled by the Imperium of man, there is no singular healthcare system. There is only doctrine. Endless, contradictory doctrine. Because to be Medicae is not to be a doctor, it is to be an instrument. Of the Munitorum, of the God Emperor, of the war effort. Medicine is a form of service, and service is obedience. Obedience means quotas, requisitions, genetic purity tests, and signed authorizations for blood loss thresholds. A life cannot be preserved without paperwork. A wound cannot be cleaned without an oath. And triage. Triage is theology, not science. It's easy to imagine that the Imperium, in its unimaginable scale, must have refined medicine to an art. But the opposite is true. This is a culture that has not advanced in 10,000 years. It has hardened. Where once surgery was innovation, now it is replication. Patterns of organ removal passed down through generations not as training, but as prayer. There is no research, no peer review. The machine spirit in a trauma rig must be appeased, not interrogated. If it sputters, the patient dies. If it screams, the patient is possessed. Either way, someone is going to get burned. And yet, within that fire, there is function. Medica detachments keep soldiers on their feet long after their bodies should collapse. Hive Medicae spires purify toxins that should kill in seconds. Astartes apothecaries pull gene seed from a brother's corpse with the reverence of a priest removing relics from a shrine. The Order's Hospitaller march through radiation storms with their vox canticles blazing. Litanies of flesh and antiseptic screamed over the wounded. There is no mercy here, but there is purpose. Always purpose. To understand the Officio Medicae is to understand the Imperium's stance on suffering. That agony is not an aberration, but an inevitability. And if it must exist, it must be used, managed, categorized, redeemed. Pain must have hierarchy, or it becomes heresy. This is not a story about healing. This is about control, about institutions that exist not to cure, but to contain, to decide who walks again, who limps, and who is discarded into the reclamation tanks before their organs start to rot. Because in the Imperium of man, a corpse is only useless when it can no longer serve. The word is older than the Imperium. Medicae. High Gothic. Spoken like a prayer, written like a sigil, sealed in red ink beside the names of the wounded and the dying. But its meaning is not static. It has mutated across millennia. It means healer, yes, but it also means regulator, extractor, witness, punisher, preservationist of Imperial assets, administrator of life units and authorized expiration. The Medicae does not exist to stop death. It exists to supervise it. Medicae is not a person. It is a function. An individual may bear the name, a combat triage specialist in a flak-stained greatcoat, or a Rejuvenat surgeon in a shrine clinic above the stars. But that name does not belong to them. It is borrowed from the throne. It can be taken back. Because Medicae is a title of privilege, and privileges have quotas. This is not an oath to help. It is a contract to optimize. The patient must still walk. The soldier must still fight. The citizen must still labor. The body is a resource, and the Medicae is the one who measures what can still be used. On some worlds, Medicae means autopsy under a flickering lumen. On others, it means bionic replacement done by surgical servitors who no longer dream. In orbital infirmaria, it means removing bullets without anesthetic, so stim reserves can be saved for officers. In the hive gutters, it means scraping rot flesh off with cogitator-sharpened shears, while a Lord Hailer chants surgical litanies to drown the screaming. None of it is for comfort. It is for continuity. There are variants, field medics in the Astra Militarum, apothecaries among the Astartes, sister chirurgeons in the Orders Hospitaller, Mechanicus biologist hybrids who have replaced every nerve with plasteel, but they are all Medicae. They all perform the rites of preservation. Some do so while reciting datasheet invocations. Others do so while singing hymns. A few remain silent, letting the sacred instruments speak for them. But all of them operate under the same axiom. The body must serve the Imperium until there is nothing left to extract. There are no hospitals in the way we once understood them. No sanctuaries of rest, only facilities. Clinics stacked between Munitorum armories. Life support labs where stasis takes precedence over healing. Barrack habs where survivors are stacked 3 high and pain suppressant dosages are reduced based on planetary threat index. There is no such thing as discharge. Recovery means return to duty. Terminal means inefficient. The Medicae does not ask what hurts, they ask what functions, what still moves, what can be cut, drained, patched, or replaced. They do not comfort, they assess, they administer pain to prevent failure. They cauterize before infection, not of the body, but of the system. The Medicae is the firewall against collapse, not a healer, but a mechanic of the human form. And should the flesh prove insufficient, then they turn to replacements, not just bionics, not just augmetics, but harvested marrow from Hive-World plague pits, blood rigs recycled from penal batch survivors, flash-cloned tissues with purity seals stamped across half-grown lungs. In the dark recesses of Medicae sanctums, life is not sacred, it is segmented, stored, and repurposed. Medicae is not mercy. Medicae is the doctrine of survivability, measured in flesh weight and duty hours. And in the Imperium, survivability is just another name for usefulness. It does not call itself a ministry. It does not call itself a guild. It is simply the Officio. A word that means nothing by itself, but everywhere implies something absolute. To the Administratum, it is a ledger of healed assets. To the Munitorum, it is a compliance vector. To the Inquisition, it is a sieve for mutation and contamination. And to the common citizen of the Imperium, the Officio Medicae is both a last hope and a final sentence, depending on the signature on the form. The Officio Medicae is not a monolithic building somewhere in the segmentum solar. It is a network. A distributed lattice of clerics, servitors, and sanctioned practitioners nested across every populated world and voidcraft of the Imperium. Its reach is infinite, its logic obscure. No two jurisdictions are exactly alike. In one sector, Medicae authority may fall under planetary governors. In another, the Officio answers only to ecclesiarchal synods. On war fronts, it submits to Astra Militarum command. On quarantine worlds, it operates independently, as a sealed system, an autocracy of scalpels. Its hierarchy is invisible to the uninitiated. There are no simple ranks. Roles are defined less by seniority and more by access. Access to genetic purifiers, trauma archives, psi dissection tools, stim licenses, autopsy databases, and priority banned Vox rights. A senior Rejuvenat adept on a shrine world might wield more operational influence than a full Spire Medicae chief on a manufacturing planet. Titles emerge from circumstance: chirurgeon, hypophysician, rite surgeon, osteolexarch, blood mendicant, each name a reflection of the tools they're permitted to touch. Training, such as it exists, is not centralized. Some Medicae are raised in scolums under the shadow of administratum oversight. Others are born from battlefield necessity, taught to seal wounds with quarter iron and sealant foam before they can read. Many are recruited from the Order Hospitaller or siphoned from penal Medicae projects, forgiven in exchange for decades of service. A few are pressed into the role by inquisitorial mandate, either as penance or as cover. The only consistency is this: no one chooses to join the Officio Medicae. They are assigned, requisitioned, or condemned to it. Within its sanctums, everything is procedural. Every tool is blessed. Every step in a surgery is dictated by sub-liturgical rubric. For each minute of incision, there must be 3 of prayer. Every data loom linked to Medicae storage is monitored by the Mechanicus and purged hourly. Biorecords are stored not digitally, but in chromatic wax cartridges and etched code slates, lest a machine spirit grow erratic and corrupt patient lineage. The records of the dead are sealed under triple-tier lex rites because a misfiled identity could result in posthumous execution. But the Officio is not limited to clinic walls. It is just as present on the battlefields of Armageddon and the quarantine zones of Sepphoris Secundus. Medicae caravans roam the wastes, marked by bone-white pennants and sigils of bandaged skulls. Orbital wards aboard Navy vessels operate under permanent lockdown, with every corpse scanned, logged, and incinerated within 4 hours of expiration. Some void stations even include surgical cathedra, where an archchirurgeon presides over vivisection theatres like a high priest, surrounded by bionically modified attendants who record every suture as scripture. In times of war, the Officio scales like a fever. On major campaigns, it deploys trauma chapels, mobile apothecarian tanks, bio-incinerator rigs, and triage servitor barracks. Requests for stim shipments are processed through dozens of intermediary signatories. Priority is always given to the most strategically valuable personnel. A line trooper may bleed out while a Vox operator receives cautery. It is not cruelty, it is calculus. And above it all, detached, unspeaking, exist the unseen custodians of the Officio's core. Unnamed, faceless, ensconced in fortress facilities deep beneath throne worlds or drifting in locked orbit around plague worlds, immune to jurisdiction, unmoved by emotion. These are the arbiters of policy. They do not see patients, they process throughput. To serve the Officio Medicae is to become one part ritualist, one part bureaucrat, one part instrument of preservation. You are not permitted to care. You are required to record. They do not wear white. They do not bear the symbol of the Red Cross. Their heraldry is not that of comfort, but of duty unshakable. When the Adeptus Astartes take the field, there is one among them who does not fight for glory, does not seek the thrill of melee or the thunder of bolter fire. The apothecary is not a healer. He is a sanctifier of death. And when a space marine falls, it is the apothecary who arrives, not to save, but to retrieve what still matters. This is the apothecarian, not a place, not a building, a rite, a function, an office observed within every chapter that still adheres to the Codex Astartes. It is the sacred science of gene seed stewardship and battlefield preservation. To be inducted into its ranks is not simply to learn anatomy, it is to become an archivist of legacy, a surgeon of imperial continuity, and a sentinel of the genetic future of mankind's greatest weapon. They operate with no ceremony beyond what is necessary. Astartes do not cry out when wounded. Their physiology does not allow for weakness. But when the Laraman cells cannot clot the wound, when the black carapace has been breached, when the twin hearts stutter beneath armor torn by Lascanon or demonic fang, the apothecary steps forward. His armor is modified, often white or bone-hued, bearing the caduceus or the chalice, depending on the chapter. His gauntlet houses the narthecium, a sacred multi-tool that is part surgical drill, part auto-injector, part bone saw, part memory needle. Each one is individually blessed. Each one has tasted the blood of gods. Astartes' biology is not simple. Their organs are legion. 19 implants, each one vital. The progenoid glands, those twin vaults of genetic memory, must be recovered before the body fails. The apothecary does not ask permission. The brother's death is confirmation enough. He kneels, carves through plasteel, flesh, ceramite, and gene-laced muscle. He recovers the glands. And then, if there is time, he closes the warrior's eyes. The apothecarian holds its own internal hierarchy. Novitiates study for decades, learning to read pulse patterns and metabolic code, ingesting tomes of genetic lineage from the chapter's founding stock. Every chapter's apothecarian has its own procedures. Some operate in silence. Some chant from memory the entire history of the Primarch during each recovery. Some burn incense. Others work in the sterile silence of vacuum-sealed apothecary bays, watched by machine spirits and purity servitors. But whatever their rights, the apothecarian is unyielding in its duty. In war zones where extraction is impossible, apothecaries are authorized to destroy their fallen brothers to prevent gene thief corruption. If the enemy threatens to reach the body first, be they traitor Astartes, genestealers, or worse, the apothecary may detonate the corpse with a sanctified melter charge. No grief, no hesitation. Legacy is worth more than memory. Not all apothecaries survive the weight of it. Some grow silent, removed from their brothers. Others become more devout than the chaplains themselves, seeing each recovery as a communion with the Emperor's purpose. A few vanish altogether, their minds breaking under the burden of countless deaths they could not stop, but were duty-bound to preserve. In certain chapters, apothecaries may ascend to even more sacred ranks. The sanguinary priests of the Blood Angels serve not just as gene seed stewards, but as spiritual guides, carrying the Red Grail and anointing warriors with the lifeblood of Sanguinius. In the Death Watch, apothecaries must learn the alien as well as the Astartes, dissecting Xenos physiology with the same reverence they afford their fallen comrades. No one thanks the apothecary. No one asks how many brothers' memories he carries. There is no time for reflection. The apothecarian must always look forward, to the continuation of the chapter, to the legacy of the gene seed, to the next life that must be preserved, even if the body does not survive. Because the Imperium does not require immortality, it only requires memory to be harvested before the corpse cools. They arrive in silence, no fanfare, no declaration of authority. Their robes are not stitched with gold, but lined with antiseptic gauze. Their armor bears no purity seals, only the white cross of the Hospitaller, over plates dulled by fire and soaked in the memory of too many dead. And where they walk, the wounded hold their breath, not out of reverence, but because they know, if the sister reaches you, it means you still have a chance to serve. The Order's Hospitaller are not a medical corps. They are a martyrdom, one of the most austere and least understood arms of the Adeptus sororitas. They do not carry bolters or flamers into battle, not often. Their war is quieter, against gangrene, against warp burns, against the unraveling of flesh and spirit that follows in the wake of demonic incursion. They fight disease with the same precision their militant sisters use to cleanse heresy, and they do not ask permission. They are assigned to guard regiments, planetary defense units, Imperial Navy fleets, Shrine World hospitals, and void quarantine stations. Wherever the Imperium bleeds, a sister hospitaller is already kneeling beside the gurney, or the corpse, or the surgical slab. Her tools are not just mechanical, they are sacred. Her bone saw is engraved with verses from the Lamentations of Saint Dominica. Her auto-injectors are loaded with stim derived from relic fruit grown in the garden crypts of San Leo. Even her gloves are stitched with microfilaments that record biometric data directly into prayer scrolls sealed inside her surgical satchel. But make no mistake, she is not kind. To be treated by a sister hospitaller is to be judged. Wounds are evaluated not just for severity, but for worthiness. Cowards are passed over, the impure are left to rot. A soldier with a righteous injury, a bolter blast received while holding the line, will be treated with divine fury, every ounce of pain converted into liturgical recitation. But a self-inflicted wound, a failure to maintain gear, a lapse in faith. These are not medical conditions, these are sins, and the sisters do not heal sin. Yet when the moment comes, when the screaming starts and the flesh begins to fail, it is the hospitaller who stands firm. She does not flinch at warp tumors. She does not hesitate at plague boils. She has seen men dissolve screaming under Xenos neurotoxins and kept operating as their eyes wept blood. Her strength is not in resistance. It is in indifference to her own pain. Her prayers are not for the patient. They are to sanctify the act. Because the Emperor sees every incision, and he does not accept failure. The Order's Hospitaller recruit from among the orphans of war, children whose faith held firm even after their world burned, girls who chose the Medicae ward over the Flamer and the Bolter. They train in isolation, deep within Schola Progenia subchapels, where screams are muffled by hymnals and anatomy is memorized alongside the psalms of restoration. Their first patient is often themselves. Their final test is always fatal for someone. Some hospitallers accompany Sisters of Battle into combat directly, serving as battlefield triage and relic recovery agents. Others operate sanctuaries carved into the ruins of shrines and cathedrals, treating pilgrims who arrive already dying from exposure or faith-induced mortification. And in the darkest corners of the Officio Medicae, they serve as examiners in purity tribunals, assessing whether a soul is worth the effort of survival. There are no medals, no recognition, no leave, only the next patient, only the next decision, to cut, to cauterize, or to walk away. Because in the Orders Hospitaller, mercy is not a virtue, it is a liability. There is no room to scream, not on a battlefield where artillery deafens and vox chatter cuts through the air like steel. When a guardsman is hit, there's no time to hope. There is only a sharp intake of breath, the rattle of flak armor, and a whispered prayer that someone, anyone, saw them fall. Because in the Astra Militarum, to survive an injury is not luck, it is logistics. And if your name isn't on the right form, if your location isn't on the squad auspex, then your blood joins the dirt, and no one will ever know you died. But sometimes, only sometimes, someone does arrive. They don't wear white. Their armor isn't clean. They reek of burned flesh, promethium disinfectant, and long hours in trench water. These are the field chirurgeons. Grizzled, hollow-eyed, unofficial, necessary. They don't heal. They stabilize. They don't question. They cut. The Munitorum doesn't always recognize them. The Officio Medicae rarely trusts them. But to the men and women of the Guard, they are salvation scraped together with stolen tools and a half-charged defibrillator. Their kits are always too small. A bone saw scavenged from a Mechanicus wreck. Stim injectors 3 years past ration expiry. Pain suppressants replaced with raw recaf concentrate and powdered ammonia. Most have no formal training. What they do have is experience and trauma. Enough to know how long someone has left by the pitch of their scream. Enough to field rig a splint from lasgun chassis and tape. Enough to lie with conviction when a dying trooper asks if they'll make it. They are attached to squads unofficially, often promoted from among the ranks after saving a sergeant with nothing but gauze and grit. They are assigned no rank, wear no insignia, and if they falter, the commissar will not hesitate to put a bolt through their skull. In fact, many field medics carry a second pistol, for mercy, not for themselves, for the ones they can't save. The work is endless. After an engagement, they crawl the wreckage of trench lines, dragging the moaning from under collapsed ferrocrete, ignoring the rats and the cold and the sound of orbital bombardment in the distance. They don't triage by injury, they triage by function. Can this one still hold a rifle? Can they be patched fast enough to return to line duty? If not, they're logged, tagged, left for the corpse reclaim crews. And the chirurgeon moves on, blood drying on their gloves, vox static screaming in their ears. In some regiments, the chirurgeons are respected. In others, they are resented, especially when they're forced to amputate without anesthetic, or when they must prioritize a commissar's paper cut over a trooper's collapsed lung. But none of it matters. They are not here for friendship. They are here because someone has to be. When things break down entirely, when vox lines are cut and the commanding officer is a smear on a crater wall, the field chirurgeon becomes more than just a medic. They become historian, final witness, the one who writes down names in a data slate they'll bury in the mud because no one's listening. Not really. The Imperium doesn't reward survival. It simply notes that equipment has returned to function, that the unit can still fire. But still, the chirurgeon endures. No hymns, no banners. Just the steady, practiced motion of sealing a chest wound with a thermal patch, muttering the same phrase again and again, like a ward against madness. You're not dead yet. And sometimes that's enough. In the Imperium, tools are never just tools. A blade is not a blade. It is a relic, sanctified through use, cursed through failure. Nowhere is this more evident than within the Officio Medicae, where every surgical instrument, every vial, every chirurgical rig is both functional and liturgical. These are not implements of healing. They are extensions of belief. machined rituals used to extract compliance from flesh. The most sacred of all is the narthecium. A gauntlet-worn apparatus employed by the apothecarian, it is at once a saw, an injector, a diagnostic cogitator, and a gene seed retrieval core. It hums when activated, its spirit bound to the death throes of 1,000 battle brothers. No part of it is replaceable without rite and oil. Each component must be reconsecrated before redeployment, and its kill switch may only be deactivated by voice lock, sometimes requiring the name of a fallen comrade as key. Then there are the medi-tools of the field chirurgeons, rust-slick scalpels that have outlived 3 owners. Servo-assisted auto-lancets recovered from penal surgical trains. Combi tools modified with quarter arrays, purified under the gaze of blind Lex mechanics. A single functional Auspex in a Medicae unit might be generations old, held together by ritual string bindings and hope. Many of these tools are functionally irreplaceable. The machine spirits within are fractured, temperamental, held together by incense, oaths, and guesswork. Pain is often controlled by stim injectors, crude, violent, and barely distinguishable from combat chems. Medicae prefer administration through calibrated auto-pistons, but in high-pressure triage scenarios, it's often jammed directly into exposed muscle. If the dosage is too high, the patient will seize. Too low, and they'll feel the bone saw go in. There is no middle ground, only a calculation of acceptable risk. Life support, when available, comes in the form of archaic trauma rigs, coffin-sized capsules loaded with injectors, restraints, and internal picked capture arrays. Inside, the patient's vitals are monitored by a half-sentient cogitator, typically housed in a shrieking bundle of data looms known as a triage cherub. These malformed servo creatures record everything, sometimes rewinding their own memory voxes to replay last words, sometimes misfiring, reciting the death chants of unrelated cases. No one trusts them, but no one discards them either. That would anger the spirit. And always, there is the knife. Whether it is a monoscalpel forged in the manufactorums of Ophelia 7, or a jagged bone blade repurposed from a Xenos war priest's remains, cutting is the first step. There is no regeneration here, no nanocytes. The Imperium does not regrow. It removes, amputates, severs, replaces. That is where the bionics begin. Limbs of plasteel and ceramite, each more crude than the last. Mass-produced in forge worlds that haven't seen clean water in millennia. A cybernetic arm is not for grace, it is for lifting crates, firing stubbers, and returning to duty. Neural links are seared into the spine without anesthetic. Eye replacements flicker with feedback. Lung implants rattle when the atmospheric filters clog with ash. Each upgrade a downgrade to humanity, and yet a preservation of function. For the elite, there are blessed augmetics, crafted by Magos biologies, stabilized with psycho-reactive alloys, capable of operating in warp-tainted zones. These are rare, dangerous, often assigned not to the faithful, but to those with the clearance to survive their activation. And they come at a price: compliance implants, mood dampeners, Vox-tracked dosage feeds. A gift that bleeds control. Most Medicae facilities possess mortuary mechs, servo-controlled dissection platforms designed to extract organs, drain blood for reclamation, and sort the dead by purity index. In some regions, these are venerated as saints. In others, they are feared as executioners. Their pick sensors blink slowly in the dark, waiting for the next body to catalogue. Nothing is clean, nothing is sterile. Every object in a Medicae arsenal is smeared with blood memory and machine doctrine. Every tool bears witness. Every replacement whispers. Because in the Officio Medicae, salvation is not granted, it is installed. They are not trained, not in the way we once understood the term. There are no white coats, no lecture halls. There is no graduation. There is only selection. There is only surviving the indoctrination without breaking in front of the mirror helix where failure stares back with your face. To become Medicae is to be chosen, not for kindness or skill, but for endurance. Children pulled from Scholam Progenia vaults are sifted for neural resilience. If their thoughts can resist psychic static, if their empathy can be dulled without compromising precision, they are taken. Some are handed over by planetary governors as tithe. Others are sentenced into the Officio by tribunal, judged too intelligent for labour, but too deviant for command. A few volunteer. They do not last long. The first phase is observation. This is not education. This is exposure. Cadets are forced to watch surgical rituals conducted on heretics and mutants, without anesthesia, without protective screens, without context. The goal is to desensitize. If they vomit, they clean it. If they flinch, they are reassigned. If they cry, they are removed. No second chance. Emotion is a contaminant. Those who pass begin the rite of enumeration. Here, the human body is reduced to data. 96 muscle groups, 47 sanctioned incision patterns, 12 nerve knot clusters, 9 purity grades of blood. Failure to recite any of these from memory under pressure results in correction, administered not with cane or rod, but with denial of stimulants, oxygen deprivation, or sleep cycling in stasis beds. The Medicae must function without optimal conditions, because the Imperium never provides them. Pain becomes the metric. Interns are subjected to calibrated injury under controlled conditions to test their reaction times and stitching capacity. A typical trial involves lacerations across the thigh and abdomen, followed by a 10-minute period of mobile suturing while under suppressive noise litanies and flashing Auspex strobes. The test is not just to treat, but to think through agony, to remain lucid while blood leaves the body. Ethics are not taught, morality is not considered, doctrine is supreme. A life may be preserved only if it serves the wider strategy. Trainees are taught to evaluate a wound not by depth, but by usefulness of the patient. A senior Vox officer missing an arm is prioritized over 3 junior lace gunners with abdominal punctures. This is not cruelty. It is hierarchy. It is how the Imperium survives. Graduation, if it can be called that, is marked by a ceremony called the calibration. Each initiate is given a subject. Not a patient, a subject. No name, no rank, just a number and a symptom. They are expected to diagnose, extract, stabilize, and restore function. No guidance, no second attempts. If the subject dies, the trainee is reassigned to administrative servitor duty. Brain scooped, reconditioned, and looped into a data loom. If the subject survives, the Medicae is licensed and assigned a posting. Post-calibration, specialization begins. Those with steadier hands are chosen for battlefield triage. Those with stronger stomachs are directed toward autopsy and pathogen recovery. A few are selected by the Inquisition for clandestine assignments, interrogations under the guise of treatment. These Medicae disappear from all records. Their oaths are rewritten. Their names are burned. At no point is compassion addressed. The Officio does not care if you weep in private, though most learn not to. It does not monitor for psychological collapse, because collapse is assumed. Those who break do so in silence. Some stab themselves with used stim injectors just to feel something sharp enough to cut through the numb. Others overcorrect, turning their trauma into cruelty, cutting too deep, leaving sutures half-finished, whispering scriptures to themselves until the walls echo with verses meant only for their own sanity. But if they endure, if they pass, if they survive long enough to hold the rank of Medicae, then they are no longer people. They are fixtures, nodes in a sacred network. They do not belong to themselves. They belong to the wound. And the wound is never closed. There are wounds the Officio Medicae will not touch. Not because they lack the skill. Not because the tools aren't sharp enough. But because some ailments are older than anatomy. Some contagions do not obey logic. Some patients are already gone, long before the scalpel descends. These are the untreatables. The Imperium is a rot that marches. It consumes systems, not with plague, but with bureaucracy. But beneath the endless layers of doctrine and decree lies a truth the Medicae never speak aloud. There are infections that defy classification, blights that twist the genome, curdle time, strip memory from the bone. They come not from exposure to cold or radiation, but from proximity to something unsanctioned, something unreal. Warp-borne afflictions are the most feared. When the veil thins and a demon passes through, it does not simply scar the flesh, it rewrites it. Victims appear whole at first, coherent. Then the symptoms begin. Teeth that weep black ichor, lungs that exhale silence, spines that bend away from their own owner's intent. The Medicae will try to treat once. They will inject, slice, drain, purge. But nothing holds. The body forgets its own architecture. The patient weeps backward. At this point, standard protocol is incineration. No sedation, no last rites, only flame. Then there are the plagues. Not the simple ones. Not the flesh fevers or gut-slick boils that ravage feral worlds. But the ones that walk, that speak, that knock. Infected soldiers who beg for help with eyes already consumed by rot. Epidemics that spread through dreams before they manifest in flesh. On Hive Subiaco Diablo, the corpses rose 3 days after burial. They were not reanimated. They had never stopped moving. They had simply slowed, so deeply, so imperceptibly, that even death had forgotten them. The Officio deployed its best: sanitizers, biopyres, orders hospitaler with sealed visors and toxin-fed respirators. None of it worked. By the time the Inquisition arrived, the world was a whisper of bone dust and half-living static. The planet was condemned, orbital cleansing authorized. The Medicae who survived were never redeployed. Their identities were classified, their families erased. There are also Xenos vectors, some so subtle they escape notice for decades. Gene mods seeded through imported grain, spore clouds from meteor fragments that rewrite human emotion before they infect tissue. In the Jericho Reach, a Medicae station documented an outbreak where every infected colonist believed they were being healed, by voices only they could hear. It turned out to be a Tyrannid pre-invasion adaptation. The colony was neutralized, the audio logs were sealed. Even now, their data sigils are forbidden to pronounce aloud. And still, the Officio persists, because to admit powerlessness is to invite doubt, and doubt is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford. So when the untreatables appear, the response is not cure, it is containment. Quarantine zones are dropped in by orbital insertion, encasing entire populations in carbon steel sarcophagi. Seals are reinforced with ecclesiastic wax, not to keep the infection in, but to keep the prayers out. Because if the Emperor hears them, it means he must act, and that cannot be risked. Some Medicae units are trained for these moments. Called null wards, they operate in full silencing armor, incapable of speech, incapable of recording what they witness. Their function is to process, to sterilize, to forget. A few are psi-null operatives, a few are vat-grown, their memories wiped hourly. None of them survive deployment for long. And there are the planets where treatment is never even attempted. Blight worlds, where the clouds are bone, the soil breathes, and the only hospitals are altars to the plague god. The Officio marks these as black zones. No entry, no monitoring, no retrieval. Not even the dead are worth recovering. If the world breathes, it is already lost. But even then, the Medicae records it, logs the symptoms, classifies the failure, adds one more line to the lexicon of extinction. Because in the Officio Medicae, even the incurable must be documented. Suffering, after all, is still data. Pain is not a side effect in the Imperium of man. It is a metric, a signal, a moral directive from the body to the soul. And within the Officio Medicae, it is classified, codified, and enforced with the precision of a battle drill. Across every operating slab and triage cot, the Index Doloris is engraved into metal. It is not a scale, but a doctrine. 5 grades, each mapped to purity of reaction, each level a hymn. Level 1, discomfort within duty. Level 2, noble ache of the loyal. Level 3, agony as penance. Level 4, redemption through rapture. Level 5, martyrdom without death. Beyond that, pain is no longer registered. It becomes communion. Medicae initiates are tested with this scale etched into their skin. Literally. They must memorize it while enduring it. For the patient, pain is diagnostic. But for the healer, it is structural. Pain is not to be erased, only interpreted. The Emperor suffered. so must you. Every treatment begins with an evaluation of the subject's response, not to injury, but to meaning. Does the soldier scream? Do they pray? Do they smile through shivering teeth? Their reaction determines not only priority, but faith. A soldier who bleeds silently is not brave, they are suspicious. One who cries in high Gothic is logged for follow-up. One who curses the emperor is often marked for euthanasia. This standard is not applied solely to humanity. Xenos interrogation falls under apostate chirurgy, and while not sanctioned openly, it is practiced in shadowed basements of astropathic archives and mechanicus black halls. Medicae attached to inquisitorial cells operate with dual registers, Index Doloris for humans and Cryptopane Codex for others. Orcs are durable but irrational. Eldar require precision, their nerves as fine as wires. Tau, emotionless but chemically delicate. Tyranids cannot be interrogated, only dismantled. Few live long enough to catalogue the effects, but more often, pain is measured in silence. In the underhives of Necromunda, healing is often forbidden. The act of enduring illness is seen as a test. Any Medicae found administering unauthorized care is labelled a traitor, not to the law, but to the faith. The ecclesiarchy maintains strict oversight of unearned survival. On penal worlds, pain thresholds are used to calibrate servitor induction. Too little endurance, and the subject is deemed flawed, unworthy of mechanical rebirth. Too much, and they're placed on pain-retentive loop, their agony recorded and looped as devotional audio in local shrine chambers. Even within the Sacred Order's Hospitaller, pain is wielded with surgical intention, not just as a response, but as prophecy. The sisters maintain tomes where cases are recorded not by outcome, but by screams, pitch, frequency, content. Some believe the Emperor speaks through suffering. Others know better. He listens, and what he hears becomes doctrine. So the Officio Medicae continues. Not healing, not fixing, but decoding the hymn of agony that binds the Imperium together. Every cry, a verse. Every sob, a prayer. And if the pain never stops, then the music never ends. They wear white, not to comfort, but to reflect the light of suffering back into the eyes of the dying. The Order's Hospitaller are not nurses. They are relics in human form, temples bound in flesh. Each sister carries a relic sigil embedded in her sternum, wired into the ribcage, humming softly with residual faith. They do not speak unless the words are sanctioned. They do not treat unless the injury is worthy. Their operating sanctuaries are not hospitals, they are sanctified vaults. Anyone brought in unconscious is deemed insufficiently pious unless a chaplain intercedes. Lives are weighed against relics, and prayers are louder than screams. The Hospitallers operate in every war zone where the ecclesiarchy holds sway, but their authority is not logistical, it is moral. Medicae who deviate from their code are punished, not by the Departamento Munitorum, but by internal silence. Their reports vanish, their clearance codes are revoked, their patients are reassigned. If correction fails, they are declared hereticus minoris and offered one final task, to operate on themselves as penance. The Rejuvenat cults, by contrast, do not speak at all. These are not institutions, they are factions. Quiet covens embedded in the high spires of cardinal worlds and Terran-adjacent systems. Their art is not healing, but halting time. Not stasis, but seduction. Noble houses pour credits into illegal serum acquisition. Lord Generals spend decades under low-yield stasis to preserve decision-making authority into the next crusade. Rogue traders trade not in goods, but in years. And still, the Officio looks the other way. Because the Medicae guilds are bound by contradiction. They are tasked with the care of all mankind, but must prioritize those who can afford it. Not with money, but with utility. A general is more important than a child, a psyker more valuable than a priest. And those who control time control the continuity of doctrine. Rejuvenate procedures are not without price. The serum distorts memories. Prolonged use calcifies emotions. Many who use it become ritual dependent, unable to feel unless engaged in sacred procedure. The most extreme cases require daily rites of reflection, bloodletting, and identity affirmation, lest their neural identities dissolve into abstraction. Some Medicae quietly call these patients time wraiths, souls stretched too far along the mortal coil. They don't sleep, they don't age, but they forget how to want. In the deepest vaults of the Officio Medicae, beneath the echoing halls of the Civitas in the Segmentum Solar, there are records, sealed under priority grade Omega, detailing rejuvenate failures so extreme they became infectious, not biologically, but psychologically. Entire hab blocks began to mimic the behavior of one overextended planetary governor, his despair bleeding into public routine. A forced sterilization of the zone was conducted under ecclesiarchal decree. No remains were recovered. Still, the Imperium continues the pursuit of longevity, not out of greed, but necessity. Time is the rarest commodity. With it, a Lord Militant can outlive his failures. Without it, even saints decay before canonization. Civitas Medicae, those rare bastions of advanced care embedded in throne world adjacent sectors, exist to safeguard continuity, not life. They are staffed not by doctors, but by relic interpreters and body curators. Patients are displayed, not cured. Their wounds are maintained as examples. Their recoveries, if any, are ritualized and entered into liturgical record. To be admitted into a Civitas Medicae is not a rite, it is a sacrifice. The cost is total observation, no privacy, no silence, no exit. Recovery in these places is indistinguishable from penance. And yet every year, 1,000 noble families offer their scions into these institutions, not to save them, but to place their bloodline under the watch of something uncorruptible. And that, more than medicine, is what the Officio offers, the illusion of incorruptibility. The suggestion that somewhere behind every curtain of rot and pain and incense-choked despair, someone is still clean, even if that someone doesn't exist. No Medicae tent stays upright when the sky splits. There are rules in warfare, implicit, ancient. Even in a galaxy poisoned by betrayal and flame, the wounded once enjoyed the briefest sanctuary. The red seal of the Officio Medicae meant something, meant mercy. That time is gone. Now Medicae stations are the first to die, not because they are targets, but because they are beacons. Their lumens pull the broken inward, too many, too fast. They become gravity wells for agony, and that pressure eats them alive from within. On Cadia, during the 13th Black Crusade, a full triad of field hospitals was established beneath the ruins of St. Dorgo's Basilica. Within 12 hours, they were overrun, not by chaos, but by their own patients. Fever-maddened guardsmen stormed their own triage lines, searching for imaginary cures. Medicae drowned in blood that wasn't theirs. When reinforcements arrived, they found the gurneys turned to barricades and the auspexes whispering prayers. On Armageddon, during the Third War, Order Hospitaller sister captains were seen leading fire teams, not to kill, but to excise. Whole wings of burned-out aid stations were purged under ecclesiastic rite to prevent the spread of psychic trauma. Not infection, remnant horror. Some wounds did not close because the pain refused to end. In Necromunda's Palatine cluster, a Medicae wing was buried beneath 40 meters of rubble after hive quakes cracked the ferrocrete foundations. Vox traffic from inside continued for 2 days. It was assumed survivors were trapped. Rescue teams descended. They found the walls clawed from the inside, not to escape, but to deepen the wound. Every survivor had turned to ritual mutilation. There was no reason, only silence. The Officio has protocols for such events. They are called Aegis protocols, invoked when doctrine breaks under fire. They include immediate reliquary termination, destroy all sacred surgical tools to prevent profanation, patient de-identification, erase nameplates and genocode to ensure no one remembers the failure, scripture inversion, recite healing rites backward, symbolizing the reversal of divine intent. The last step is fire. Triage cathedrals, once monuments to salvation, are collapsed by orbital strike, nothing is recovered, especially not data. Because when care fails in the Imperium, the wound isn't allowed to scar. It must vanish. The Officio cannot afford memory. Even servitors designed to endure sometimes abandon their code when battle reaches the slab. In one infamous case aboard the Medicae frigate Vostroya's Mercy, a single trauma servitor, exposed to continuous screaming for 9 standard days without cogitator rest, initiated an unsanctioned override. It began terminating patients alphabetically. The log ends before the letter H. Those who stay behind are never remembered. The phrase "he died a medic" holds no weight. There are no statues, no shrines. Only the faint echo of a scalpel dropped mid-suture, buried beneath the sound of orbital barrages and misfired oaths. And yet, hospitals still rise, not because they work, but because the Imperium needs the idea of healing, needs the lie. The fantasy that, in a universe that devours everything good, there is still somewhere to be fixed. But every Medicae knows, in the end all hospitals burn. Some wounds do not bleed. They wait. Within the Officio Medicae, there is no margin for weakness. The oath to serve is absolute, and its price is not taken in blood, but in silence. The longer a Medicae serves, the less they speak. Words rot under the pressure of failure. Over time, only ritual remains. There is no formal doctrine for Medicae psychological decay. That would imply recognition. Instead, there are ghost chapters, unofficial addendums to the uplifting primer, and the Codex Hygia that circulate hand to hand, data scratched onto cogitator slates or whispered in between incisions. They are not medical texts. They are survival manuals. Entry 1. You will kill someone you wanted to save. Entry 2. You will save someone who wanted to die. Entry 3. You will not be forgiven for either. The system does not allow for retreat. A failing Medicae cannot request reassignment. There is no leave, no rest. The machine spirit of your Narthesium records your heartbeat. If it stutters, you are logged for inspection. Those who fracture are not removed. They are reassigned to silent wards, subterranean units beneath major militarum staging zones where no Vox transmission is permitted. Here, they operate indefinitely on the unsalvageable, chemically restrained berserkers, trauma loop penal legionnaires, and unsanctioned psychers in post-lobotomy tremor states. Their purpose is not healing, it is containment. Inside these tombs, suicide becomes sacrament. It is not called that, of course. It is referred to in the Officio's forbidden dialect as completion. It is self-inflicted, ritualized, and coded into the service record as internal system collapse. If the death is too messy, a Medicae executor corrects the record post-mortem. Because the Officio doesn't allow breakdowns. It only accepts shutdowns. And yet, despite all this, there are still those who endure. They do not endure because of hope. Hope is too soft. They endure out of compulsion, the theological conviction that suffering is sacred, and that the scream of a dying soldier is not a tragedy but a summons. Something divine is being born in that scream, something old and righteous, and someone must be there to catch it. These are the Medicae who cut themselves before surgery, a drop for every patient lost, not out of guilt, but to balance the weight. These are the ones who whisper the names of the dead into the Vox line between operations, not to be heard, but to be logged. So the machine spirit remembers. Some go further. Among the Scholae Exanimus, those rare Medicae who serve directly beneath the Inquisition's Black Seal, there exists a rite of reversion. In it, the practitioner slowly removes every memory of healing they ever performed. Neuromnemonic surgery, incrementally wiping their successes until nothing remains but the failures. It is said that when the last healing is gone, the Emperor himself speaks in their dreams. There are no records of these individuals, only echoes. The Officio Medicae survives not because it is pure or efficient or even faithful. It survives because it is necessary, because someone must drag the dying from the dirt, because someone must remember what it meant to matter, even when nothing matters anymore. But not all wounds can close. And some never should. They call it healing. But what the Officio Medicae performs is something older, something more brutal. It is not recovery, it is interruption. a delaying of death, a stalling of consequence. For 10,000 years it has worked. Just enough. Just barely. But barely does not hold. Rumours seep from beneath the sealed data looms of the Martian enclaves. Schematics half-burned into cogitator feeds. Vocal fragments etched into servitor subroutines. The Adeptus Mechanicus has theories, unsanctioned of course, about what comes next. They speak of automated surgery units bound to quantum prediction matrices, of Medicae servitors who do not obey organic instinct but predictive ethics, of self-regenerating gene skin sprayed over bone in microseconds. These aren't dreams. They are real. Just not permitted. Because the ecclesiarchy believes pain must be instructive. There are prototypes. A rare breed of technosurgeons, heretics by any other name, who rebuild men faster than they can be killed. They operate from black ships, moving with crusade fleets unofficially. Their results are perfect. Their cost is unimaginable. Every soldier they treat comes back altered, faster, colder, less afraid, but also less themselves. It is not augmentation. It is erasure by refinement. The Inquisition classifies such acts as medical heresy. Yet the Officio keeps copies of their logs, reads their findings, considers their models. Because even the Medicae knows the system is collapsing. Population surges in the Segmentum Ultima have outpaced trained Medicae 10,000 to 1. Hive worlds have begun implementing AI-guided trauma pits, unauthorized, where casualties are dropped and something pulls them out healed. What that something is, no one can confirm, but the results cannot be ignored. There is another whisper. A project called Caducem Mechanis, translated loosely as the final physician. A biological intelligence, grown not in a vat, but in a war zone. Fed on memories, trained by osmosis, designed to understand suffering not as a symptom, but as a signal. Its body is reportedly gone, destroyed after a failed assassination attempt by rival Adeptus factions. But its algorithms remain, encrypted, buried deep beneath terror. It waits. And there are darker futures still. On Direxis Prime, a full battalion of guardsmen reported no injuries after a 48-hour bombardment. Not because they were unharmed, but because their minds had been altered to ignore injury. Their flesh tore, their nerves fired, but their thoughts refused to process it. They kept fighting. They did not stop until ordered. The Officio has not confirmed who authorized this, but the data was collected. Even the navigator houses have begun to request customized Medicae implants for void-born children. Organ binders that grow with the host, rewriting development from the inside out. The aim is simple: to prevent fragility before it forms. The question now isn't can the Medicae adapt, it's should it. Because every new advance subtracts something sacred, makes pain less meaningful, makes death less real. And if death becomes procedural, then life loses its gravity. So the Officio watches, records, considers. It does not innovate, but it remembers those who did. And in the sealed chambers of the inner archive, one truth is kept alive, etched in gene code across a wall of synthetic bone. Healing without suffering is a kind of treason. That is the future the Medicae fears most, a future where it is no longer needed.